If you live in a city, you're probably sicker than your countryside counterparts. Yep, you heard me right. I bet you didn't know that simply existing in the city is elevating your blood pressure, or that your lack of awe when you look out and see skyscrapers and concrete is actually hurting your brain, or that your elevated cortisol levels have something to do with the noise you hear every day. So I couldn't believe all this until I read and reread The Nature Fix by Florence Williams, and it completely changed how I viewed my own ailments. As you may know from my TikTok, I recently relocated to Qatar, or Qatar. Now, I knew it was a desert, and I knew I'd be missing some greenery, but I vastly underestimated just how much my morning walks, my weekend hikes, and my reflection by lakesides was doing for me, my mental health, my physical health, and my soul. I know that sounds dramatic, but like it really is dramatic. In fact, I keep trying to explain to people here how I feel absolutely suffocated. And people look at me funny, like, how could you possibly value nature or morning walks over money, luxury, material comfort? And I often just give up trying to explain. And then I go read a couple of books to feel validated in my discomforts. And I do feel valid. I do feel validated. Does anybody else do that, by the way? Do you just go try to find the science behind your discomforts to just feel better about them? Like, okay, now I know why they exist chemically, and now I feel better about them. My therapist has even caught on, and she began recommending books for my ailments, and shout out therapist, but that's a tangent. So, without further ado, we're going to be talking about nature, our relationship to it, our biological need for it, and what happens when it is missing from our lives. Whether it's gazing at a tree from a window or plunging deep into the untamed forest, being and moving in nature is crucial to our physical well being and our mental well being. From healthy blood pressure levels, blood sugar levels, reduced inflammation, eyesight health, digestive issues, to even having anti cancer effects. Not only this, but being in nature also is what keeps us sane, creative, and emotionally balanced. Which brings me to the first part. We're going to be talking about nature and sanity, the biology of awe and relaxation. The human brain is inherently attuned to nature, a byproduct of our evolutionary history, where for millennia, for most of human history, we've lived intimately with nature, and our bodies learn to respond positively to it. Studies consistently show that being around nature improves mental clarity, reduces stress, and improves mental well being. But why is this exactly? Well, when we step into a forest or walk by a river, our parasympathetic nervous system is activated. This is the rest and digest response, which is counterpart to the fight or flight response. In this state, our body slows down. Our cortisol levels are reduced, our blood pressure is reduced, blood sugar, and even our heart rate. And so you can see here that our body is actually going into a state of rest, and that brings along with it this mental clarity, the creativity, and all the things we can do when our body doesn't feel like it's in danger. And just a side note, most people living in the modern world have chronically elevated cortisol levels, which is also linked to our leading causes of death, cardiovascular illnesses, and cancers. Chronically elevated cortisol levels can do more damage than just maybe high blood pressure. It can cause autoimmune disorders, lifelong symptoms of PTSD, depression, insomnia, anxiety, and the list goes on and on and on. It is quite scary, but there are easy fixes. In one journal, we found that simply gazing at a tree for an elongated period of time can activate your parasympathetic nervous system, even if you're gazing at it through your window or even your car window. But don't do that, focus on driving. But more than that, one of my favorite Japanese studies, it's fascinating, it showed that taking a 30-minute walk in nature actually reduced cortisol levels by 16%. That is a huge difference. It also reduced blood sugar by 3% and blood pressure by 4%. Now, if you took a walk in an urban area in the hustle and bustle of the city, I'd bet my bottom dollar, I don't know who says that anymore, but I say that. I'd bet my bottom dollar that you would experience the complete opposite of those results. So you would experience an increase in cortisol levels, blood pressure, blood sugar, and likely heart rate. Even if you're very used to the city, even if you've lived in, say, Washington, D.C. or New York City your entire life, even if you don't mentally or psychologically notice it anymore, your body does, because your body always keeps the score. And that's another great book that we'll be talking about in a different episode. If you haven't read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, you absolutely should. But that's, again, once again, another tangent. Now we're at my favorite part, awe. So I had no idea that awe was such an important thing for us, but Florence Williams actually called it a nutrient for our brain. And awe is this feeling we have, this profound sense of wonder when we're confronted with something so vast and beautiful, like towering mountains or beautiful ancient forests, the untamed wilderness, something that increases feelings of connectedness, reduces stress, and makes us feel like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. All of that puts our daily stressors into perspective and helps us feel at ease, improves our mood, and helps us stave off things like depression and anxiety. And even more than that, research published in the journal Emotion found that people who experienced awe regularly had reduced chronic inflammation. And so inflammation can be responsible for many of the illnesses we see in this modern world, like cardiovascular illnesses, autoimmune disorders, and that list also goes on and on and on. And the second thing it does is it helps us feel more connected to people. So, research in the Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center, I believe that's what it's called, I'm pretty sure, found that people who experience awe more often also act more civically minded.
Very demure, very mindful.
That is the exact wording. I kid you not. It's funny wording, but it's just so cool. Civically minded. So if you haven't been experiencing awe, I think it's time, if you can, to take a trip down to some forest near you and look at it and experience this wow moment. And I say that because something like awe, so complex, it can't be artificially manufactured. Florence Williams suggests that the perfectly manicured and meticulously placed parks and nature that isn't really nature, but like those, where they're like bouts of nature, would will never come close to evoking a feeling of awe from you. We have to be in something imperfect, wild, and vast to feel that awe. And usually that only comes with beautiful landscapes. I mean, I think you can probably feel awe at like beautiful artwork or awe towards a human being, but there is nothing like mountains and rivers and lakes to really produce that feeling within you like you are a part of this world and it is a part of you.
Eternity later.
I remember when I first came to Doha, I stayed at a place and there was a little manicured park near where I stayed. And each tree, each individual tree, had like a concrete or ceramic lining to it with lights, and it was perfectly cut and shaped. And it actually made me feel very uncomfortable. I had never missed big ugly trees that much in my life. And I was like, where are the beetles? Where are the birds? Where are the living things? And I felt this deep sense of discomfort in that park rather than feel a sense of joy or awe.
Brother, ugh.
Now we're going to be talking about the cognitive benefits of walking in nature. You see, walking has long been associated with mental clarity, and for good reason. So, since the time of Aristotle, there has been this idea of solvitur ambulando. It is solved by walking. If I butchered that pronunciation, please don't come at me. But Aristotle actually taught his students when he was walking through corridors and castles or gardens. It is also known to be something that Einstein did, J.K. Rowling, I don't know how you pronounce it, so don't come out.
Rolling, rolling.
And even Newton and Da Vinci all escaped to natural settings to come up with their greatest ideas, solve the world's greatest problems, and expand their already expanded brain. Walking in natural settings can act as a cognitive and emotional reset, reducing what psychologists call mental fatigue. And I know you know what mental fatigue is because I'm sure we all feel it. See, when we walk in natural environments, our brain engages in something called soft fascination. So, this soft fascination occurs when we're in an environment that captures our attention without overwhelming it, allowing our brain to do things like rest, reflect, and come up with new ideas. This is very different to hard fascination, when we're in cities, for example, listening to honking cars, flashing billboards, and just being overwhelmed by every stimulus there is. I'm getting overwhelmed just talking about it. One 2015 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that participants who walked for 90 minutes a day in a natural setting showed reduced activity in the subgenual prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain linked to repetitive negative thoughts and depression. This shift promoted creative thinking, problem solving, and emotional well being. And indeed, when I walk in nature, I sure do feel that reduction in the subgenual prefrontal cortex. Do you? So, we've already talked a lot about why nature calms us down and the mechanisms by which it does so. But why does it make us more creative? See, the key lies in the default mode network, the DMN. So, this is a kind of network that is only present when we're at rest or daydreaming. DMN fosters creativity, self reflection, and memory consolidation. Now, when we're in natural environments with their very soothing and non overwhelming stimuli, we're able to access the DMN, enabling us to have the kind of creative epiphanies that are described by philosophers such as Nietzsche and Rousseau. Nietzsche, in fact, famously said that all truly great thoughts are conceived while walking. But for this walk, if you have the ability to go to a natural setting away from the city and the noise, it may be a better idea. Now we're going to be talking about light and noise pollution, the hidden stressors that may be making you sick. Constant exposure to noise from traffic, construction, and just urban life generally is constantly elevating your cortisol level and making you more stressed. Constant exposure to noise pollution can actually elevate your stress levels by increasing the production of cortisol, which, as we've discussed earlier, is linked to things like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and many other cardiovascular illnesses. Actually, one study published in The Lancet found that people with long term exposures to noise pollution suffered higher rates of hypertension and actually had a higher risk of dying from a cardiovascular related disease. This is all in contrast to natural sounds like the rustling of leaves or bird songs, which actually reduce cortisol levels and help you kind of get back to a state of equilibrium after stressful events. Light pollution also poses serious risks to our health, particularly our circadian rhythm. And I know you've heard about circadian rhythms because all of those TikTokers and Instagram smurs who are like, hack your circadian rhythm to be more productive and have more waking hours to do more things and produce more as the well-oiled cog in the machine that you are.
-1 minute sleep.
But on a serious note, artificial light disrupts everything from your mood to your sleep-wake cycle, and it can also impact your immune system. When our circadian rhythms are thrown off, we start to see higher levels of insomnia, depression, and metabolic disorders like diabetes. And this is because our circadian rhythm is also directly linked to our hunger-fullness cues. It's a very intricate and complicated cycle. I don't want to get too much into it, but your hunger and fullness cues, ghrelin and leptin, or leptin and ghrelin, they are very much inextricably linked to your sleep wake cycle. And if that's thrown off, your hunger and fullness is also going to be thrown off. Also, your hormones and your mood, and so many more things. But all of this can also impact your risk of cardiovascular disease, like we talked about with every single point in this video. Natural darkness, as found in the wilderness, can actually help reset these rhythms. So if your rhythm is thrown off, it's okay, it can be put back together again. Humpty Dumpty style. This all might be a little more drastic than you think. One study in Nature Communications found that excessive light exposure has been linked to a 14% increased chance of heart disease, and this was mainly linked to poor sleep quality and circadian disruption. Which brings us all to the health consequences of not living with nature. So, what happens when we cut nature out of our lives? Well, the consequences are quite far reaching. Beyond what we already talked about physical health, one study published in Lancet Planetary Health found that people who live in urban environments with little access to green spaces had a 25% more likelihood glitch of developing a mental disorder compared to people who had access to green spaces. So actually, the Finnish government, who has made nature a cornerstone of public health, good job, Finnish government. I really like Finland. They're doing such a good job. Anyways, they recommend spending at least 5 hours a month in nature to reduce your risk of all kinds of ailments, all of which we talked about. But this is just the beginning. Florence Williams suggests that deep, long immersions in nature can help actually relieve all kinds of ailments and heal trauma. And this is actually a little bit mentioned in The Body Keeps the Score as well. Nature is a big part of rehabilitation from trauma, war, PTSD, or really any matter that has such a huge negative impact on the body. And so, to bring it all together, when we distance ourselves from nature, we aren't just foregoing picturesque landscapes or the occasional escape from the hustle and bustle of the city. We are, in a very real sense, losing a part of ourselves, severing ourselves from what it means to be human. the biological, psychological, and mental need to be and move within nature. In this moment, I am reminded of John Muir's poignant words, "I am disintegrating into a machine for making money." In this simple yet profound statement, he captures the essence of what it means to live disconnected from the natural world, ourselves, and one another. In a world driven by constant productivity and achievement, nature offers us a much needed antidote. It allows our bodies to rest, our minds to rest, for us to experience relaxation, awe, and creativity. But more than a backdrop for relaxation or recreational activities, nature acts as a healer. In fact, there is one Japanese practice called Shirin Yuku. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's forest bathing, and it has become globally recognized as a method for reducing stress, anxiety, and even blood pressure. Spending time in the forest or simply being around trees is proven to reduce inflammation and improve mental clarity and acts as a natural mood booster. These aren't just pleasant side effects, they're proof that we need nature and that nature is an essential part of us living healthy and happy lives. And yet, in modern life, nature has been relegated to the background. Urbanization, industrialization, and the rise of technology have all created environments that are rife with sound and artificial light and glass and concrete, and all of that just dominates our environment rather than having the gentle rhythms of nature. All of this is called artificial wilderness, or like I like to call it, concrete jungles, and it acts as a prison that is making us sick. And all of that may have sounded dramatic before you listened to this episode, but I hope that after listening to all the points, you see just how crucial nature is. And so, no matter how many manicured parks we have, or no matter how many pots of plants we've meticulously placed in the corner of our bedroom, it won't give us what we really need. And that's exactly what I'm calling for. I'm calling for us as a society to reclaim our relationship with nature, to view it as a necessity rather than a luxury. We need cities built with green spaces in mind, with spaces that act as refuges from noise and light. We need spaces that prioritize having nature at its core rather than having nature as an accent. The benefits of nature are not abstract or mystical. They're real, measurable, and urgently needed in our modern society. Without nature, we risk becoming the very machines Muir warned us about, very productive and yet very empty. We need to connect with nature. It's an imperative to find out who we are, to rest, to heal, to connect with the world and others, and to put our life stressors into perspective. And so, please go outside if you have the chance. I hope you're listening to this episode outside. If you're not, maybe you should listen to the next episode outside. And with that, I'm Danya Salah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ish Matters. I hope to see you next time, right here next week.